Welcome back. In this video, I'll be assembling frame 2. And since I've been following Dan Lee's Temptress quarter scale boat build, today, let's follow along together.
So let's start putting some frames together. That's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to take a look at the construction of the frames and the cutting of all the parts. And we're going to be putting some of them together on this miniature frame construction board that I've got here. So we take a look at the drawings. We're going to start with frame 2. We're going to do that first. And it's shown in the drawings from either side, so you can see what the assembled frame looks like from both ways round, and gussets removed on the forward side there. So with the frame construction board, we've got these parts, and there's a dowel hole for every component. So any component that is positioned on this has generally a dowel hole at either end so that it can be firmly aligned and the whole thing can be squared up. So let's put one together then. So we've got fillers, which are chine fillers marked as 2CF, and we've got a keel filler here which is marked as 2KF. We've then got bottom frames, side frames and a deck beam. So if we pull all of those out, the basic premise for putting these parts together is that you want to be putting this joint together in a horizontal plane. So what you don't really want to be doing is to put these pins in and then sliding these downwards. What you're going to do is have the effect of shearing the glue off that joint as you push it down, and we want a nice good coverage glue joint in there. Whilst we're on the mention of glue, when you're doing this in the full-size boat, all of these glue joints should be done with epoxy and following similar processes that I use in some of my other videos. So if you're gluing end grain timber or plywood or generally anything absorbent, you want to be doing a two-step bonding process where you wet out the end grain or the plywood with unthickened epoxy first, and then once that's started to set up and finished wicking into the end grain, you go on to a thickened epoxy for putting the joint together. And then of course the deck beam can come up from the bottom side and locate onto those two parts on the side frames. So put a bit of glue on those. So once we've got those in place, we can put the chine fillers in. So these are really a separate entity to for a number of reasons. They could have sort of been part of the bottom frames, but this changes throughout the boat and the angles all get a little bit different. They're predominantly to increase the amount of material that there is in the frame around the area of the chine where you've got a big cutout. So we'll put them in separately. They also, doing them separately, just made it much more efficient for timber use within that area, so it made sense to do. And they all locate with these little half round notches. Okay, so if you're doing this with epoxy, you're going to be wanting to put the gussets in place in order to hold all of this in position, and you can do that either with pins or temporary screws that come back out afterwards. There's a variety of ways that you can do that. You can leave the screws in there if you want to put silicone bronze in there and double up on the strength. The epoxy alone is really enough to hold this, so it's not really necessary in this instance. You want to have dowels that sit flush with the top of your frame, which is easy enough to do. So we're going to put these little pins in that go through and sit below the surface. Okay, so when it comes to putting parts like the gussets in place, the engravings for them are all on the internal mating faces, or in this case the writings on them. So you know that that part needs to go on the frame in this direction so that the engraving or the pencil writing is hidden within inside the joint. And that also helps you to side parts as well. So you can see if we fitted the gusset, slight differences on the inside of the cutouts. Now that is nothing to worry about because those reflect the bevel that will be put on this frame when we get further down the line and we start to set the chines in. So what you want to do when you're positioning the gussets on this boat is to line up the internal face with the inside of the keel filler, get that in line. Don't really worry about what's going on the outside there, because that's going to get shaped and beveled at a later stage. So we'll glue it in that position. Then we've got a couple of shear gussets to go on. Again, these will go with the engravings inside of the joint. And then we've got the keel gusset as well. And this is the same story, so this wants to be text on the inside and then aligned to the inside of the gusset filler as well. So there we have side 1 of frame 2 done. Okay, so we've got frame 2 there. Now we need to turn it over and do the second side. So we'll pull the pins out. So that shows you what we're looking for in a jointed frame on side 1. So we've got side 1 glued up and we've covered our holes that go through into the frame construction board. Now, in order to place the frame the other way around on the board, we need those holes through onto the other side. So what you want to do now is to use the holes that are cut in the frames to drill those and transfer them through the gussets onto the other side. Okay, so now that we've got those holes through there, we can place this back on the construction board the other way around. And this is a good little check just to make sure that everything is absolutely 100% symmetrical as well, because of course we flipped this the other way now, so if all of these holes still line up nicely, we're on the right track. Okay, so now we've got that placed again, we want to be positioning the bulkhead on the other side of the frame. So we get that into place and we line everything up nicely. We want a nice even slight gap in all the way around, because again this is going to be beveled, so these aren't 100% on all faces. So we will get that into position. Now with the bulkheads, and this is quite an important thing, these want to be only dry fitted to the frames at this stage. They mustn't be glued to the frames at this time. And there is a reason for that, and that is because when we get to the strong back setup stage, the bulkheads need to be able to be split from the frames because of the way that they fit over the stringers. We'll get to that further down the line, but for now, remember it. So we're going to screw the bulkhead to the frame, and these will just be temporary screws that will come back out, and we will glue it to the frame further down the line, but not right now. So when the frame is up to this stage, that is almost complete with regards to the construction board. It's got one other primary function, and that is the positioning of the strong back legs. So these are the legs that will position the frame longitudinally within the strong back system, and also they will set its height as well with regards to waterline 1, which is our critical dimension to follow when it comes to installation. So the way that you install those legs is with a dowel that fits into this SBL mark, or uses this SBL mark for alignment. So there's one for frame 1 on this boat because frame 1 is further in, and then the SBL 13:2 does frames 13:2. And then we're ready to install our strong back leg. So these are just done with ripped strips of particle board, MDF or chipboard or something like that. Whatever it is, it wants to have a good straight referenced outer edge here, which goes into the dowels, and this is going to be the plane of the inner face of the strong back as well. And at this stage, the length of this leg isn't really critical. The main thing to focus on for now is this outer face that lines up with the inner side of this strong back leg dowel. And one thing that is very important to note and reference from the drawings is whereabouts these strong back legs are installed with regards to the various different elements of the frame. So any frame that has a bulkhead on it, these are installed on the bulkheads and not the frames, and any frames that don't have bulkheads on them, they'll be installed directly to the frames, and you'll see the reason for that a little bit further down the line when it comes to installation of the stringers. Okay, so once that is done, the only thing left to do is to transpose the lines from the frame construction board onto the various elements of the frame. So you just want to transpose the center line down the middle of the frame, and most importantly we need waterline 1, which is what sets our height for these legs and where they sit in the strong back system. So we need the center of that engraved line. We've also got the strong back line. Now this is the top face of the strong back line. You can mark that onto the legs if you want to. It's not actually particularly needed. It's the waterline 1 that is our key reference here. So I'll probably leave that off. So that is us done on frame 2. So there we've got the first frame done. So just to recap, we've got gussets on one side that are glued, all of the internal joints and the fillers are glued, and the bulkhead is dry fit only to the frame at this stage. The legs are also dry fit to the bulkhead because they will come off at some stage further down the line, and they've picked up our waterline 1 mark. We've also got a center mark down the middle of the bulkhead, which is a really handy thing just to keep all the way throughout the build in case you need to measure anything. It's always good to have a center line. Check everything's straight. You can run a string line through it, various different things like that. So that is about where we go up to on a per frame basis. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you in the next video.
Cheers, guys.